We like to think of movie theaters as safe places. They're public, well lit, and you're surrounded by strangers. But that's exactly what makes them terrifying. Because when something goes wrong in a crowded room, you assume someone else will notice first. You assume someone else will react. Tonight, I'm sharing 3 true horror stories that all happened inside movie theaters. These stories were sent in by viewers, former employees, and terrified witnesses. And by the end of this video, you might never feel comfortable sitting in the dark again. This first story was sent in by a college student from Ohio. He decided to go to a late-night showing on a weekday, hoping for a quiet, private experience. The theater was almost completely empty. In the vast auditorium, there were maybe 6 other people scattered around. He chose a seat near the middle of the theater, a good vantage point for the screen. Just as the trailers started to roll, to seats to his right, a man in a dark jacket sat down. At first, nothing seemed unusual about him. The theater was dark, and people often came in late. But about 20 minutes into the movie, the student started to notice something strange. The man hadn't moved, not once. He had no popcorn, no drink, and the glow of a phone never lit up his face. He was unnervingly still. During the loud, explosive scenes on screen, the man didn't flinch. During the quiet, tense moments, he didn't shift in his seat or make a sound. The student tried to dismiss it, telling himself the man was just deeply engrossed in the film. But then, he realized the most unsettling detail. The man wasn't even facing the screen. His head was tilted, just slightly, in his direction. It wasn't enough to be obvious, just enough to feel profoundly wrong. He tried to ignore it, to focus on the movie playing in front of him, but the feeling wouldn't go away. The longer he sat there, the more the discomfort grew into a creeping dread. It felt like the man wasn't watching the movie at all. It felt like he was watching him. At one point, the student intentionally adjusted himself in his seat, making a bit of noise, hoping to get some kind of reaction. The man remained completely still, his head fixed in that subtle, unnerving tilt. An hour into the movie, the tension became unbearable. He stood up and went to the restroom, mostly just to escape the oppressive feeling and calm himself down. The bright lights of the hallway were a welcome relief from the darkness of the theater. After a few minutes, he took a deep breath and headed back. When he re-entered the auditorium, the seat was empty. The man was gone. No jacket, no drink, nothing left behind. He assumed the man had simply left the theater, but, as he sat back down, something bothered him. The seat cushion next to him, where the man had been, still looked pressed down, as if someone had just gotten up. It was a subtle indentation, but it was there. After the movie ended and the lights came up, he couldn't shake the feeling. On his way out, he mentioned the strange encounter to an usher. More out of curiosity than anything else, the usher agreed to check the security footage for that auditorium. And that's when things stopped making any sense. From the moment the student sat down, the footage showed that no one ever sat next to him. The seat beside him stayed empty for the entire duration of the movie. But that wasn't the strangest part. As they watched the recording, they saw that every few minutes, the empty seat cushion would slowly compress, as if an invisible person was shifting their weight. The theater manager was called over and, without any argument, immediately refunded his ticket. As the student was leaving, the usher quietly told him something else. That particular seat had been reported before. Other patrons had complained about feeling someone sitting next to them, a distinct presence, only to turn and realize no one was there. This second story comes from a former movie theater manager in Japan. In 2012, His theater was scheduled to run a late-night test screening for a new film. This was an internal event, so no tickets were sold to the public. Only staff were supposed to be present. Before the screening, the manager checked the ticketing system as part of his final sweep. That's when he saw something that made no sense. The system showed that 12 tickets had been scanned for that specific auditorium. At first, he assumed it was just a software glitch, a common enough occurrence. But when he entered the auditorium to investigate, his stomach dropped. The room was dark and silent, but he could clearly see it. In Roji, right in the center section, 12 seats were pressed down. The cushions were indented, exactly as they would be if people were sitting in them. The closer he walked, the colder the air became. One of the employees who was with him later said his ears started ringing with a high-pitched whine. Suddenly, without anyone touching the controls, the projector whirred to life and turned on by itself. Blinding static filled the massive screen, accompanied by a deafening hiss that echoed through the empty hall. Then, for just a split second, an image flashed on the screen. It was the same theater they were standing in, but it was burned, blackened, and utterly destroyed. Debris and scorched remnants of seats were visible in the fleeting, horrifying image. Terrified, they shut everything down and left the auditorium immediately, locking the doors behind them. Later that night, disturbed by what he had witnessed, the manager began to research the history of the land the building was on. He discovered that decades earlier, the site had been home to another, much older cinema. A fire had broken out during a late-night showing. The blaze was catastrophic. 12 people died, unable to escape the flames. According to the old records, they were all seated in Roji. The next week, the system glitch never appeared again. The ticketing software worked perfectly. But the manager refused to ever use that auditorium for late-night showings again. He said that sometimes, late at night, employees who had to clean the theater would report that the 12 seats in Roji would still be warm to the touch. This final story was sent in by a woman from Texas. She had decided to go see a new horror movie by herself. She got a mid-row seat in a theater that was about half full. About halfway through the film, a wave of dizziness washed over her. The feeling was sudden and intense, and she decided she needed to get some fresh air. She stood up and turned toward the aisle to leave, but there was no aisle. Where the lighted steps should have been, there was only darkness, an absolute, impenetrable blackness. She blinked, confused, and rubbed her eyes, thinking it was just the dizziness playing tricks on her. The aisle reappeared. The familiar, dimly lit steps were right there. Relieved, she let out a breath and took a step forward. And that's when she noticed something far more terrifying. She glanced behind her, and the rows of seats that should have been there were gone. No seats, no people, nothing, just a massive, empty black space stretching backward into infinity. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Then she heard whispering. It wasn't coming from one direction. It was coming from everywhere at once, a disorienting chorus of faint, indistinct voices swirling around her in the dark. A primal scream tore from her throat, and she ran. She scrambled through what she thought was the aisle and burst through the exit doors into the bright, noisy lobby. Employees immediately rushed over to her, asking if she was okay. They told her something that she still can't explain to this day. From their perspective, watching her on the security monitor in the lobby, she never stood up. She had been sitting motionless in her seat, screaming, staring straight ahead at the screen, for nearly a full minute. She never left her row. She never moved at all. So the next time you sit down in a movie theater, and you feel the pressure of a presence beside you in an empty seat, don't assume it's nothing. Because sometimes you weren't supposed to be alone.